The city is probably the oldest, most enduring invention of our civilization. The words are interchangeable: civilization, civil, civic, city. Cities evolve over time. They respond to crises, and historically, they emerge from crises stronger than ever before. So what are the future trends for cities, and what are the lessons of history?
Hello, this is Anupama Kundoo. I'm an architect and currently professor at the Fachhochschule Potsdam in Germany. I'm going to share with you 12 strategies for future urban materiality based on current cities and challenges that we've identified and areas that we feel we could radically rethink. We are going to talk about urban materiality, and I'm bringing in the second headline, time as a resource. I think that a lot of problematics of today's urban materiality has to do with the way we have perceived time. And I'm going to explain it as we go along. But I would like to start by saying that the future of the built environment must be steered in the direction that serves human society. I would like us to kind of recall our aims, to remember our original goals as architects, to be able to achieve health, happiness, and integral well-being for the evolving human society in a way that it is also in alignment with the health of the environment, the planet, which is our habitat within which we exchange air, water, and our byproducts. Reflecting upon a materiality of the built environment, our post-industrial habits need to be audited and reviewed to reconsider where standardization and large-scale supply chains may come with large unwanted consequences, such as environmental degradation, economic challenges, and a growing social segregation due to affordability of high consumption architecture, which has now become the new norm. We see the same kind of skyscrapers sprouting all over the world with the same glass facades, regardless of the climate. And these are sprouting at a very fast pace. So these trends that see commodified housing as a given, or that see architecture as a uniform global product where one size fits all, or at the most perhaps broken down to S, M, and L, these have to be questioned. I think a habitual over-standardization suppresses local intelligence. These contemporary habits result in impersonal spaces, producing environmental contamination and unwieldy carbon footprints, high overhead costs, and affordability concerns. They also alienate local knowledge, skills, and other human resources, like care and engagement. Mass production has led to the undervaluing of human capacities, including intuitive, emotional intelligence, and personal judgment as compared to machine production and operation as a new norm. So I would like to also bring in the point I mentioned about time, to rethink the notion of time. Since industrialization, there has been the notion that time is money, and that urban people have no opportunity to engage directly in their habitat production like they always used to do. So efficiency is now I don't want to say now because I'm hoping for a new now. I think I would like to say that efficiency has been related to cutting back on the time human beings devote to things. The eagerness for such efficiency overlooked the condition of the human beings in the process of creating their habitat. So for all the conveniences and efficiencies achieved, contemporary life is full of stress and rushing about. And what are we doing with all the time that we are supposedly saving? So time is a resource, a human resource that is highly underrated. We need to question at what cost have we saved that time? And to what extent have we then excluded human care and human intelligence in our frantic high speed building activity, where we do not even have time to think before we act, leave alone rethink? So I would like to bring in the perspective of, you know, looking at all the rest of the thing, of all the aspects I'm going to go into in materiality, through this lens also, you know, whether it is the fact that we cut back on our time, whether that led to major imbalances, you know, not only environmentally but socially and economically, because I think we are at a very special moment where we all found ourselves with a lot of our personal time liberated due to the COVID pandemic. So I think it's a very good moment to reflect. Despite all our technological advances, we have produced unconsciously huge environmental, social, and economic challenges for ourselves. All our problems related to our habitat are man-made. Everything that we see around us are the result of our own decisions. And I would like to propose how we could rethink some of these habits that we have created post industrialization. I will propose them through 12 strategies that we could look at as a checklist to audit where we have been going and where we could be going, and achieve a habitat that we deserve. You know, we don't need to have all the baggage along with the conveniences we are targeting. So let's begin. Strategy 1: city metabolism. So here we need to look at the big picture. We need to be able to position human settlement not only in space, as in geographical context, but also in time, looking at what was there before us, what kind of past constructs we can build upon, and what kind of future we can steer. I think the big picture is very, very important, because not only do we have a growing habitat and the tendency to create mega cities, leaving behind rural areas and smaller settlements. When we talk about sustainability as a key concern of our times, we have to keep in mind that sustainability is also a notion that has to do with time, because it's not about whether a material is good or bad alone. There are larger constructs about habitat that have to do with the settlement itself. And therefore, it's not only about sustainable construction that sustainability is about. We can look at from this image that in former times, most cities had a sense of belonging in its materiality. The materiality was anchored to the place. You could see that the materials came out of the local context. If the buildings were built in stone in areas where the landscape was about stone and rocks, earth buildings came out of in contexts where that is what was available. In deserts, you had a different language. And all of this materiality that corresponded to the immediate context has to be rethought in any case, because we have a huge growing population, and there is a kind of tug of war between urban development, because we have more mouths to feed, a larger population to accommodate, and we have not been able to go along the lines of traditional sustainable building because we were challenged with having to have less land and more people to house, so we had to go vertical. So now we're still here with this tug of war of how to achieve this, and this is the main challenge we have. But we cannot think about it purely from the construction point of view. We have to see all of this as a whole. Modern buildings, modern cities are being all created with reinforced cement, concrete, steel, and high energy materials. Part of this is due to this new demand to go vertical and save land for farming, for forests, for food, and so on. But also, every single park bench is being made out of high energy materials. And so we do need to look what is possible within that. Strategy 2, critically examining local building materials. If you take materials from around you, immediately cut back on a lot of overheads, transportation, and work regarding material sourcing. So it's obviously, it has been said, this is one of the most known strategies, that if you build with what is around you, it's going to be much more beneficial. And not only that, the immediacy of what material you have around you goes along with skills that got developed in those areas to use those materials. So there are two types of materials. There is natural building materials, materials that you can directly use, such as natural stone. But then there's also manufactured building materials such as brick. And brick can be again studied under, for example, traditionally made bricks that involved handmade and local clay with locally available fuel, and these bricks may not have achieved that kind of strength which the industrial large kiln product may deliver. But so the what one has to really study here is not just whether it's a brick or not. It's a question of how that brick is made, and if it comes from local clay, is there a local industry that we are supporting, and at what cost is that extra strength coming, so there is a close interlink between how building activity, material sourcing, etc., are deeply embedded in the territory of a place. And sometimes modern so-called contemporary ways of building have uprooted unconsciously some of these systems and know-how also. So a lot of materials such as lime are hardly being used because Portland cement is being delivered from factories. So architecture in contemporary times can still continue to be produced. Local material does not mean just vernacular architecture. There's a lot of room for rethinking there. Strategy 3, building technologies. Building material is different from building technology because building technology is to do with how those materials are being put together. So here again, we have a kind of a classification of low tech and high tech, which I also find we should go beyond that, because I think even things which appear to be low tech could actually be high tech, or in the sense that they require sophisticated knowledge. All these bolts and arches that we call vernacular actually require much more complex knowledge to analyze and design in an engineering sense. So I think under building technology, one has to critically audit what kind of local skills are available, what kind of habits exist, and whether they serve us, or are these mere habits being repeated. So there is also the opportunity to negotiate between handmade and machine made. In certain areas, you find everything is either handmade in a traditional way, and in other places you find that everything is machine made also habitually. But actually, we are today equally, every place is globally connected. Our know-how is also for all. So I think knowledge is universal, but the application is local. And so we are each project can right at the outset determine to what extent it will be socio-economically beneficial to use machines or hands, and balance all of that through the technology, which is very, very important, to consciously promote one or another. Because technologies could again alienate people and only serve machines, uh, and the economy, as it were, but maybe not the true economy. So that is one strategy, to really critically audit and consciously define the building technology. And its technology is not something you can retrofit in the last stage after you have a building concept. It has to be done right from the beginning. Strategy 4, building upon vernacular. What I mean here is not to promote vernacular buildings, as it were, necessarily, but what I really call for here is that time-tested ways of doing things don't need to get abandoned. Vernacular ways of building or traditional way of building was also continuously evolving. It's not just something that happened in the past, It's just that since industrialization, new technologies are being absorbed in the code. There is enough research going on about them. But are we doing the same amount of research on the time-tested ways of doing things? We need with new eyes, and not dismiss everything as under the word vernacular, okay? As if anything vernacular will be irrelevant for us. Strategy 5, participation. So when I spoke about time earlier, one of the interesting things is that in the creation of habitat in the past, people were involved in the construction of their habitat. There were roles for people who need to have expertise, but the bulk of it was produced through engagement of people who used those places, and they could modify them, and it could last. But modern technologies do alienate people from participating in their construction. I mean, we've outsourced housing to such an extent that we feel housing can be, we think urban housing can only be achieved through debt financing, through huge bank loans, and through companies that are very large and they may operate out of some other country. So all of those overheads are being paid by the person who's taking up huge loans, and we're paying a huge amount of our wages, our salary, for renting or buying houses. I mean, it's way more than it ever used to be, and there is scope for participation in whichever measure, if people want to do so, if it is the design allows them to do so. So this is an area we've done a lot of. We've got experience with co-housing in recent times as well, where people can really cut back on the finances they need by exchanging their expertise and looking upon their community and human resources as an asset, and allowing people to be involved and personalizing to some extent their habitat. This is also possible in the urban context, but it should be made possible proactively in the future cities. This will reduce a lot of affordability problems. Strategy 6, building knowledge and building community. We need to prioritize time spent on acquiring knowledge, and through building, there's a sense of urgency. We still need to have the knowledge, and it takes time to have that. So we need to realize that along with building buildings, we have the great opportunity through each and every building to build knowledge and to build community. We need to acknowledge the large collective of which we are a part. We need to position ourselves, look at the complex process of investigation. I have talked about it through this sketch. of the tree, where you can see very well that the bigger the tree grows, the more it branches out and bears fruit, and the bigger spans it achieves, has to do with the health of the roots. And the roots are always in knowledge. The projects are just the outcome of the process. And it's very important that, complex things like cities require knowledge in so many fields. And all of that has to be synthesized through the trunk of the tree. And through that process, can we have real integration, what design is all about. It's about synthesis and integration. So community building and knowledge building is not to be overlooked or underestimated. Strategy 7, material innovation. I think as we have gathered more and more knowledge, we are able to consider that we could perhaps create material innovation in order to face the age of climate change, where we will have a lot of new problems like disaster relief. We've got refugees. There's various reasons why people are going to migrate. We need a lot of housing. Everybody is moving and they need new habitat. And so it would be really worth looking into how we could build way more, significantly more square meters with the same amount of materials. For example, I'm investigating ferrocement because compared to reinforced cement concrete, it has better seismic properties. It could be a material that allows us to build much more lightly, to build with very little steel, and perhaps even looking at other fibers than steel, natural fibers, using this kind of materiality to spread the reinforcement very finely rather than concentrating them, large reinforcement bars at specific points. If we manage to, ferrocement is one of those examples for me. And the other new materiality I have looked at is what we call baked in situ mud houses. So this kind of projects look like vernacular housing. I mean, a lot of people slot my work under vernacular. I feel offended actually sometimes, but I mean, not that I'm against vernacular, but look, just because a technique looks familiar, like the outcome looks like brick and clay and so on, so people associate it with vernacular. But this is a new way of baking bricks in situ. That means you don't even need cement. There is a technique Ray Meeker pioneered, where he made it possible that the house works like a kiln. So the whole mud house is made with mud bricks and mud mortar, and it's stuffed with mud products that we can use later. So the house becomes a producer of building materials, not just a consumer. And I think it's very, very radical to look at fire as the cementing element and not cement itself. So, these are examples of new material innovation. Strategy 8, absorbing urban waste and looking upon waste as a resource, promoting direct reuse of the waste. So on one hand, we are not promoting that we generate more waste, but in our contemporary lifestyle, there's a large portion of our waste which is not biological waste that we can recycle into compost like we used to formerly do. There are a lot of unconventional materials. One would never associate them with building, but we've been experimenting, like, whether it is books, we are overproducing magazines, books. Sad to say, but they get burnt or pulped depending on which city you live in. And we've had the occasion to play around with some of these materials. And especially whenever we're doing temporary installations or, there's no need to buy all these materials, which you're going to just dispose of just a couple of months later when the job is done. So We've used all kinds of materials, from books with which we made furniture. We've even made, in the Library of Lost Books, it was called, a pavilion in Barcelona in 2014. There was a support structure with tubular steel, which was recyclable and directly reusable. But the upper structure, the entire canopy, was made with books sourced from the city's library, and which is, by the way, also located there at the Filmoteca in Plaza Salvador Segui. And we used something really, really local, and we produced these elements of shade. But also, it was an example to highlight that what kind of waste we're producing, but also to highlight the idea of knowledge, and that the question, what is going to be the future library in the age of internet. Then we have also worked with, Tetra Pak. Sometimes we've been producing all of these, glass bottles, even bicycle wheels as form work. These are just investigations. I often use these materials as a process with students so that they start looking at any material with new eyes. So this is mostly done to allow students to work one-to-one while they are in studio or in a workshop. Strategy 9, smart engineering. So I think I rely a lot on engineering because I think only through engineering knowledge we will be able to radically achieve a lot more with a lot less. And I think in order to save materials, we will need to invest in the human ingenuity and really to see the time spent as an investment which enriches us, as opposed to trying to save time. I would say save time, let's spend time happily, because if we invest the time, we will become more and more clever. I have been even complex called complex calculations in engineering, for example, like I said, with massive load bearing structures, or catenary curves, etc. Ever since the 60s there has been a lot done in that direction, but from Nervi to you can see what began with ferrocement, with Nervi, but it wasn't followed, or a lot of efficient shell structures were not pursued, and filler slabs and diagonal diagrid efficient concrete solutions were not pursued, often because the form work is complicated or expensive. But if one really continues what they had done up to the 60s, 50s, 60s, one could continue to go in that direction of saving materials. And here, for example, one of my recent ferrocement structures, it's still just a prototype, was produced with very light chicken mesh. In 4 days, we were looking into alternatives for future habitat. So especially in this age, like I said, for disaster relief and so on. And we wanted to build this kind of complex forms. The form work that we used was corrugated paper. There's a lot you can do. It just shows how interesting it is actually. So forms can give strength. It's not only material, but it's the form itself which lend strength, and it's a matter of engineering. This is definitely an area that is under valued. And not only that, I think there's also a lot of over design happening in engineering, just because people are unsure about what they know. So a lot of material can be saved through efficient engineering. Strategy 10, thinking with the hand. We need to create opportunities for hands-on engagement, especially so in the digital age. We need to realize that also, when you look back at the evolution of humans, actually, We know that since we were able to stand on two legs and our hands were able to become available to produce and make things, the things we make, they also make us. And so while we use smart computer solutions, it doesn't mean that we have to become passive. If we allow this type of opportunities, because the hand is a very intelligent mechanism, there's a direct integration between what we sense and what we think, and there is a constant back and forth. And I think we must keep that opportunity, and especially already in academia, because a lot of us teachers and professors, we have all lived in a much more analog age, and then we are using digital tools. But if the future generation does not have the same opportunity to be engaged hands-on, they will not they'll be missing out on some things. You can see here couple of different materials where you can see the faces of the people who are building, that they're also thinking, because actually the thinking goes on when you're solving. You have it, there's an immediacy, you get immediate feedback. These strategies, right in the academic environment, to be able to build full-scale things and build with real materials, real places, and real people, would really help us to think differently and propose with a lot more creativity. Strategy 11, check for human scale. The machine scale has invaded our worlds, and sometimes the human is disoriented in that. So I think in the end, everything we're doing in the built environment is for the people, right? So we do need to remain people-centric and not let the technologies overwhelm us, or sometimes for the convenience of machines. So when we look at the number of floors, we know that after a certain scale, we will be lost if we don't actively attend to that. So I have had the opportunity to work on a proposed city for the future. It was called The City the Earth Needs. And Auroville was created in India as a place where all these researches that we're talking about were meant to be conducted on a real site. And Roger Anger, whose visions I'm trying to cover now in a future publication that I show here, had to do with human scale. He was trying to look at how what is the kind of scale of the city itself, and what are the different strategies within the city that always promote human scale and opportunities for human interaction. So of course it has a lot to do with mobility and the new mobility that we are all going towards, where the cars are going to recede and public space is going to become connected like it used to be. So here I would like to share with you one of my present engagements here. This is a project where we are rethinking the urban tower. We are trying to look at how high density, high rise solutions need not be just a tower where the people who live on the upper stories are alienated from the lower floors. Actually, Roger Anger had proposed the entire housing and also the commercial building, the industrial areas, through this kind of a thing where the density was going from very low to very high so that the roofs could be used. And I have been working on one such urban project called Line of Goodwill. And here we are rethinking for human scale, high-rise buildings for human scale, based on the pedestrian mobility, which is not only continuing inside this long, almost 1 kilometer long structure, but it's all broken down, and it is it is laid within a context of the entire city, which is pedestrian. It was always conceived that way. And you see here an interaction where I'm talking with Jan Gale about this structure, in an academic studio conducted at University of Stuttgart, where I was teaching. Strategy 12 is to invest in human resources. To invest in human resources, that means to invest in time, in human intelligence and the muscles, all our human attributes. When we invest in them, they are not wasted. They only lead to good consequences. It leads to healthy beings and it leads to enrichment. And when we invest in human resources, we will be able to save on natural resources. That's what I feel. I think we have invested a lot in natural resources in the past in order to be able to save on human resources. But when we realized that we saved all these human resources, what did we do with all that we saved? When people are not engaged, we immediately are not happy. We are not, we have other problems. We've got more health problems. We've got mental health problems. We've got all kinds of problems, so we have to make those connections between our own well-being as a result of the processes, in the tools we have used to create our cities, or misused tools that we have misused, unconsciously. And we have the opportunity now to rethink and to set it right. So I would like to end by saying that I have brought in time as a resource for our discussion on urban materiality. And I have recently produced an exhibition of my work for Louisiana Museum of Modern Art in Denmark. The exhibition is called Taking Time. In the exhibition, you can not only see all these strategies I mentioned as a holistic integrations into all the design work I did over the last 3 decades. But what I found really interesting to be able to share there is that line of goodwill, that urban structure, which gives a hint at how future cities and future mobility could shape the future materiality of our cities. There's a 18-meter long model produced alongside very many students of various schools from Yale University, KADK in Denmark, and Fachhochschule Potsdam. But we also have 1-to-1 scale facades where we see that the new materiality includes energy generating facades, not only through solar panels, but also paints that can generate energy. But urban farming can be taken into the housing because water can be recycled into the housing. So it's like a holistic thing with green infrastructure planned in, and the vertical habitats are not so vertical. They are like hillscapes, and the horizontal and vertical are also integrated. So I hope you will have the opportunity to visit this exhibition. It's on till the 5th of April. Thank you.